No one remembers the sound first. Not the honking taxis, not the crosswalk signal ticking down, not even the way the afternoon light reflected off the glass towers of Manhattan. What people remember is the silence. The kind that falls only after someone finally decides to stop watching. The scream didn't belong to New York. New York had sharp sounds, sirens, subway brakes, impatient horns. But this sound was raw, human, fractured. "Elena, stop embarrassing yourself." Marcus Whitmore's voice was smooth-controlled, the kind of voice that closed million-dollar deals. His hand wrapped around Elena Brooks's wrist looked almost affectionate if you didn't notice how white her knuckles had turned. "Let go of me," she said louder this time. Phones lifted. Daniel Harper saw the screens before he saw her face. He stood at the edge of the crosswalk on 42nd Street. Lily's small hand tucked into his. She was talking about her spelling test, about how she hated the word through because it didn't sound like it looked. Then the scream cut through everything. Daniel's body stiffened. He knew that tone. Marcus forced a smile toward the forming circle. "She's just overwhelmed. Wedding planning stress. You know how it is." A few people chuckled awkwardly. Elena's eyes scanned the crowd. She wasn't looking for attention. She was looking for an exit. "Help me," she whispered. The word barely reached Daniel, but Lily heard it. "Daddy," she said quietly. "Why is nobody helping her?" Daniel felt the past rush up his spine like ice water. "Because it's not our business. Because it's complicated. Because stepping in makes things worse." He had said all those things before. 8 years ago. Before Rachel locked herself in the bathroom. Before the paramedics. Before the silence in their apartment that never left. Marcus tightened his grip. "We're leaving." Eleanor winced. Daniel stepped forward before his mind caught up with his feet. "Let go of her." Marcus turned, annoyed. "Excuse me." Daniel's voice didn't rise. That was what made it cut deeper. "If she's asking for help, you let go." The crowd shifted. Someone whispered, "That's the guy from the architecture magazine Harper, right?" Marcus smiled thinly. "This is a private matter." Daniel looked at Elena, not Marcus. "Do you want him touching you right now?" The question hung in the air like a held breath. Elena swallowed. No. It was barely audible. But it was enough. Daniel gently pried Marcus's fingers away, not with force, but with certainty. Marcus let go more out of surprise than submission. "You're making a scene," Marcus hissed. "No," Daniel said. "She did. And she's allowed to." The crosswalk signal beeped. Green. No one moved. Lily squeezed her father's hand. For the first time in years, Daniel didn't feel like a man hiding behind politeness. He felt present. Marcus adjusted his suit jacket. "You have no idea what you're interfering in." Daniel met his eyes. "I do," he said quietly. "I ignored someone once when she needed me to see her. I won't do that again." Something flickered in Marcus's expression. Calculation, maybe fear. Sirens wailed in the distance. Eleanor stepped back, her wrist red where he'd held her. "Thank you," she whispered to Daniel. But the moment was already being uploaded. Within hours, the internet would decide who they all were. Daniel didn't know that yet. All he knew was that Lily was looking at him differently, like he had just answered a question she hadn't finished asking. By the time Daniel and Lily reached their apartment in Tribeca, the video had already gathered 50,000 views. He didn't know that yet. He only knew that his hands were still trembling. Lily sat at the kitchen island, legs swinging, watching him pour a glass of water he didn't drink. "Daddy," she asked carefully, "were you scared?" Daniel considered lying. "No," he said first. Then he corrected himself. "Yes." She nodded, absorbing that. Children understood truth more than comfort. On the street, it hadn't felt heroic. It had felt like stepping into a memory he had spent 8 years trying to avoid. Rachel's voice had sounded different the night she needed him. Not loud, not dramatic, just tired. "I'm not okay, Daniel." He had been answering emails. He had said, "We'll talk tomorrow." Tomorrow never came. 3 hours earlier, the crosswalk light blinked down from 7, 6, 5. Marcus Whitmore's hand was still clamped around Elena's wrist. When Lily whispered, "Why is nobody helping her?" something inside Daniel split open. He stepped forward, not like a fighter, but like a witness refusing to look away. "Let go of her." Marcus turned slowly, measuring him. "I beg your pardon." Daniel's tone stayed level. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. "If she's asking for help, you let go." A ripple moved through the crowd. Phones tilted for better angles. Marcus gave a tight smile. "We're engaged. This is between us." Daniel didn't look at him. He looked at Eleanor. Her mascara had smudged beneath one eye. Her lips trembled, but her spine was rigid like she was bracing against something deeper than humiliation. "Do you want him touching you right now?" Daniel asked her. The city seemed to pause. Taxis slowed. Conversation stalled. Eleanor's breath hitched. No, one word. Soft. But it landed like a gavel. Marcus's grip faltered. Daniel stepped closer, not aggressively but deliberately placing his body between them. He didn't shove Marcus. He simply occupied the space. It was astonishing how powerful simple positioning could be. "You're overreacting," Marcus muttered. "She's emotional." Daniel's eyes lifted to meet his. Then let her be emotional without holding her down. Something in Daniel's gaze held no anger, no performance, just a kind of tired certainty. The certainty of a man who had already paid for silence once. Marcus leaned in. "You have no idea what you're interfering in." Daniel lowered his voice so only Marcus could hear. "I know what it looks like when someone asks for help, and everyone decides it's inconvenient." That did it. The street went quiet, not because Daniel shouted, but because he didn't. Eleanor stepped back fully now, free. "Marcus," she said steadier than before, "I told you I needed space." He looked around at the cameras, at the strangers. This was not how men like him lost control, not in public. "You're humiliating yourself," he said. Eleanor laughed once, a broken sound. "No," she whispered. "I've been humiliating myself for 2 years." A murmur passed through the crowd. Marcus adjusted his cufflinks. "This is absurd." Daniel didn't move. He didn't need to. Authority wasn't volume. It was presence. Sirens approached. Someone must have called. The tension shifted again. Now it was about consequences. Marcus's jaw tightened. "You'll regret this," he told Elena quietly. Daniel heard it. So did the phones. Elena flinched, but she didn't step back toward him. Police officers arrived, weaving through the crowd. Questions were asked. Marcus's smile returned, polished and practiced. He knew how to speak to authority, but the video had already captured the moment before the performance. Daniel gave a brief statement. No dramatics, no accusations. She said no. That was all. That evening after Lily went to bed, Daniel's phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Texts from colleagues, missed calls, a notification from an unknown number. He opened the video. There he was, frozen mid-step. The comment section flooded with praise. "Single dad sets example, real men protect. Where are more men like this?" Daniel closed the app. He didn't feel like a protector. He felt like a man 8 years too late. Another notification, a message request, from Elena Brooks. He hesitated before opening it. "Thank you. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't stepped in." A typing bubble appeared. "He's not who people think he is." Daniel stared at the screen. He remembered Rachel's final journal entry, the one he found weeks after the funeral. "I kept waiting for him to see me." His chest tightened. He typed back carefully. "Are you safe right now?" 3 dots. "I think so. Think, not know." Daniel exhaled slowly. Outside Manhattan pulsed with its usual indifference. Restaurants, full rooftop bars, glowing people chasing curated versions of happiness. Inside his apartment, a widower stared at a message from a woman he barely knew. He could ignore it. He could tell himself it wasn't his responsibility. He could return to safe distances and bedtime routines. Or he could answer. Daniel looked toward Lily's bedroom door, then back at the screen. "If you need help, you don't have to ask in the middle of a street next time," he typed. He hesitated, then added, "I'll answer." The typing bubble appeared again, and this time it didn't stop. By morning, Daniel Harper had a nickname. He discovered it while standing in line at a coffee shop 2 blocks from his office. The single dad hero. He heard it before he saw it. 2 college girls whispered near the pastry case, glancing at him, then at their phones. One of them tilted her screen slightly, and Daniel caught a frozen frame of himself stepping between Elena and Marcus. His jaw looked sharper on camera, his posture steadier, braver than he remembered feeling. He paid for his coffee and left without correcting anyone. Outside, Manhattan moved as it always did. Delivery trucks, double-parked cyclists, weaving through traffic, office workers glued to screens. But Daniel felt as though a spotlight had followed him onto the sidewalk. His phone vibrated again. Missed call. Evan Cole, managing partner. Daniel exhaled. At Harper & Cole, architecture reputation mattered. Corporate clients preferred stability. No scandals, no unpredictability. He walked into the glass building on Hudson Street and felt the shift immediately. Heads turned, conversations stalled mid-sentence. His assistant Mariah looked both impressed and worried. "You're trending," she said quietly. "I gathered." In a good way, she added quickly. Mostly. In the elevator, Daniel finally opened the flood of notifications. 3 million views, clips edited with dramatic music, commentary accounts praising him, others dissecting Eleanor's expression frame by frame. #Let Her Go was trending. So was #Single Dad Hero. And beneath it all, Marcus Whitmore's name. Daniel clicked one news link. Prominent attorney involved in public altercation, fiancé claims distress. The article was careful, neutral. But the comments were not. Marcus's firm had released a statement within hours. Mr. Whitmore deeply regrets the misunderstanding that occurred during a private disagreement. He respects and supports his fiancée unconditionally. Daniel almost laughed. Private disagreement. The internet had already decided otherwise. Across the city, Eleanor Brooks watched the same headlines from behind drawn curtains. Her apartment, technically Marcus's, felt unfamiliar now. Too curated, too staged. Every piece of furniture selected for appearances. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Friends she hadn't spoken to in months. Distant cousins, former co-workers. "Are you okay, call me? Is it true?" And beneath those messages from strangers. Some supportive, some cruel. "You're lucky to have a man like that. You embarrassed him. You're dramatic." Eleanor deleted her Instagram by noon, then her Twitter, then LinkedIn. Silence felt safer than commentary. Marcus had texted twice. "We need to handle this strategically. Don't make this worse." She hadn't responded. Instead, she opened Daniel's last message again. "If you need help, you don't have to ask in the middle of a street next time. I'll answer. No grand gestures, no flirting, just presence." Her thumb hovered. Then she typed, "Can we meet somewhere public?" Daniel didn't expect the meeting to make the evening news. But everything felt amplified now. They chose a quiet cafe in Soho, minimalist, expensive, anonymous enough. Daniel arrived early, choosing a table near the window. Public visible. Safe. When Eleanor entered, she looked smaller somehow. No makeup, hair pulled back, no engagement ring. He noticed that first. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi." For a moment, neither of them knew how to begin. The internet had built a narrative around them, but in person they were just two exhausted adults at a small wooden table. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," Elena said. "I know." She studied him. "Do you?" Daniel nodded once. "You didn't scream for attention." Her eyes flickered with relief. "He's calling it a misunderstanding," she said. "His firm is spinning it." Daniel sipped his coffee. "Are you safe?" She hesitated. "He hasn't come by, but his assistant collected some of his things, like she was temporary storage." Daniel felt a flicker of anger, but he kept his tone measured. "Do you want to leave him?" Eleanor looked out the window at the passing crowd. "I don't know who I am without him," she admitted. That was more frightening than fear. Daniel recognized that sentence. Rachel had once said something similar about him. He had dismissed it as insecurity. Now he understood it was erosion. "My wife," Daniel began carefully, "used to say she felt smaller around me. I thought she meant emotionally. I didn't realize she meant invisibly." Eleanor looked back at him, startled. "You were married, widowed?" A pause. "I'm sorry." Daniel nodded, accepting it without elaboration. Across town, Marcus Whitmore sat in a conference room with 3 PR consultants. "This will pass," one of them assured him. "Internet cycles move fast." Marcus stared at the paused frame of Daniel on the screen. "He made me look like a villain." "You grabbed her arm," another consultant pointed out carefully. Marcus's jaw tightened. She overreacted. But doubt crept in. Not about his actions, about losing control of the narrative. By nightfall, Daniel's face appeared on morning talk show previews. "Is chivalry back?" one host teased. He turned the television off. Lily sat cross-legged on the living room rug. "Are you famous now?" she asked. "I hope not," she smiled. "My teacher said you did the right thing." Daniel crouched beside her. "Doing the right thing doesn't make you special," he said gently. "It just makes you responsible." She thought about that. "Is the lady okay? I think she's trying to be." Lily nodded, satisfied for now. After she went to bed, Daniel checked his phone one last time. A new headline blinked across the screen. "Whitmore and Associates announces internal review." The empire was cracking, but slowly. Another message from Elena appeared. "He's asking me to release a joint statement." Daniel typed back. "What do you want, 3 dots?" Then, "I want to not be afraid of disappointing him." Daniel stared at the sentence. The viral moment had frozen a scene. But this was the real story. And it was only beginning. The message arrived at 11:47 p.m. Daniel was sitting alone at the dining table, laptop open but untouched, the city lights flickering against the glass like distant signals he refused to answer. Thank you. Not just for that day. For listening. He read it twice. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the faint sound of Lily turning in her sleep down the hall. Quiet had once felt peaceful. Now it felt like a test. He typed back slowly. You don't owe me gratitude. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Maybe I owe myself honesty. He stared at that sentence longer than he should have. They met again 2 days later. Not at a cafe this time, but in Riverside Park near the Hudson. Public open, but softer than glass walls and curated interiors. The river moved steadily beside them, indifferent to headlines. Elena wore a long coat and no ring. Daniel noticed that again. They walked side by side without touching. I signed a lease, she said after a while. A small place in Brooklyn, month to month. That's good, Daniel replied. She gave a short laugh. It feels like jumping off a cliff without checking how deep the water is. Daniel understood that metaphor too well. They sat on a bench overlooking the water. For a few minutes, they just watched joggers pass and dogs tug at leashes. Ordinary life. The kind that continues even when yours fractures. He never hit me, Elena said suddenly. Daniel didn't flinch. I didn't think he did. She nodded, relieved he hadn't jumped to conclusions. But he controlled everything else. My schedule, my friends, my clothes. She let out a breath. He'd say things like, I just want what's best for you. Or you don't see the bigger picture. Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. Did you? He asked quietly. See the bigger picture? Yes. She shook her head. I saw his version of it. A boat horn echoed across the water. Elena continued, voice steadier now. If I disagreed with him, he'd withdraw. Days of silence. Or he'd question my memory. That's not what I said. You're being dramatic. After a while, I stopped trusting my own reactions. Gaslighting. Daniel had read the term online, recently attached to thousands of viral threads. It sounded clinical, abstract, but here it sounded like erosion. I thought marrying him would make it easier, she admitted, like commitment would stabilize things. Did you love him? Daniel asked. She considered that. I loved the version of him that existed when other people were watching. That answer lingered between them. Daniel swallowed. My wife used to ask me if I was proud of her, he said quietly. Elena turned to him. I'd say, of course. I provided. I showed up to events. I wasn't cruel. He let out a humorless breath. But I was absent in the ways that mattered. He hadn't spoken about Rachel like this in years. The name still felt fragile in his mouth. She struggled with anxiety, he continued. I told myself she was strong, independent. I thought giving her space was respectful. Elena didn't interrupt. She wasn't asking for space, Daniel said. She was asking to be seen. The wind picked up slightly, tugging at Elena's hair. What happened? She asked gently. Daniel stared at the river. She overdosed, prescription medication. The doctors said it wasn't necessarily intentional. His jaw tightened. But I remember the night before. She said she felt like she was disappearing. Elena's eyes softened. And you, I said we'd talk tomorrow. The word tomorrow hovered like an accusation. They sat in silence after that. Not awkward, just heavy. I'm sorry, Elena said. Daniel nodded. I stepped in that day on the street because my daughter asked me why no one was helping, he admitted. But also because I couldn't stand watching another person disappear in front of me. Elena's throat tightened. I wasn't sure anyone would come, she confessed. I almost didn't. That honesty shifted something between them. No hero, no victim, just 2 adults trying to untangle their own blind spots. A group of teenagers passed by, laughing loudly, phones in hand. Daniel caught a glimpse of himself again on one of their screens, paused mid-step, captioned with bold white letters. Real men step up. He looked away. You're not responsible for fixing me, Elena said quietly. The statement felt deliberate. I know, Daniel replied. Are you sure? She pressed gently. He met her gaze. That was the real question, wasn't it? Was he helping her or trying to rewrite his past? I don't want to save you, he said carefully. I just don't want you to feel alone while you figure things out. Elena studied him, searching for performance. She found none. My therapist says control doesn't always look violent, she said after a moment. Sometimes it looks like protection. Daniel absorbed that. Protection. He had worn that word like armor for years. I thought being calm meant being good, he admitted. I didn't realize silence could hurt. Elena's eyes shimmered, but she didn't cry this time. I don't want to be small anymore, she said. Then don't be. Simple words, not easy ones. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and stiffened. Marcus. She turned it face down. Daniel didn't ask what it said. After a moment she exhaled. He's asking to meet. Says we need to control the narrative. Daniel felt the weight of that phrase. Control, narrative, image. What do you want? He asked again. This time Eleanor didn't hesitate. I want to tell the truth. The wind shifted. Somewhere in the distance church bells chimed the hour. Daniel felt something unfamiliar rise in his chest. Not guilt, not redemption, possibility. But possibility came with risk, and both of them had already learned how expensive silence could be. Eleanor stood. I'm scared, she admitted. Daniel stood with her. So am I. For the first time since the street, she smiled small but real. They walked toward the park exit together, not touching but no longer strangers. Behind them the river kept moving. Ahead of them consequences waited. And neither of them knew yet how public the truth was about to become. The box had been sitting in the back of Daniel's closet for 8 years. He told himself he kept it for Lily, for when she was older, for when the questions came sharper. But that wasn't the truth. The truth was simpler. He hadn't been brave enough to open it. That night after returning from Riverside Park, Daniel stood in the dark bedroom with the closet door half open. Manhattan glowed beyond the window, the city's reflection fractured across the glass like memory itself. He pulled the box down. Inside were hospital papers, condolence cards, and Rachel's journals. He hadn't touched them since the week after the funeral. Back then, grief had been loud. Friends, casseroles, legal forms, Lily crying in her sleep. Now grief was quiet, and quiet was more dangerous. He sat on the edge of the bed and opened the first journal. Rachel's handwriting was neat, deliberate, controlled. October 14th. Daniel says I worry too much. Maybe he's right. He always sounds so certain. I wish certainty were contagious. Daniel swallowed. He remembered that night. She had asked him if he thought she was too much. He had kissed her forehead and said, "You overthink everything." He had meant it kindly. November 2nd. I don't think he sees how tired I am. Not physically. Tired of being strong all the time. Daniel closed his eyes. He had been working on the Chicago project then. Late nights, conference calls. He told himself providing stability was love. Another page. December 19th. Sometimes I test it. I say something slightly sad and wait to see if he notices. He usually doesn't. The sentence felt like a blade. Daniel remembered that December. He remembered Rachel standing at the kitchen counter staring at nothing. I feel like I'm fading, she had said. He had answered emails while replying, "You're just stressed." He hadn't looked up. He hadn't seen the way her shoulders sank. Silence can be complicity. The thought arrived uninvited and stayed. Across the city, Elena sat on the floor of her new Brooklyn apartment, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes. The space was small but hers. The walls bare, the air unfiltered. Her phone buzzed again. Marcus. She let it ring out. Instead, she opened the voice memo she had recorded months ago but never played back. The night Marcus had accused her of being emotionally unstable after she confronted him about reading her emails. His voice filled the room now. You twist things, Eleanor. You always twist things. She had cried in that recording, apologized, even though she hadn't known for what. She stopped the audio halfway through. For the first time she heard it clearly. Control didn't always shout. Sometimes it whispered until you doubted your own memory. Her phone vibrated again, this time a text from Daniel. Are you okay tonight? She stared at the message longer than necessary, then replied, trying to be. Back in Tribeca, Daniel turned another page. The final entry was dated 2 days before Rachel died. I don't want to disappear. I just don't know how to stay. His vision blurred. He remembered that night vividly now. Rachel, sitting on the edge of the bed, knees pulled to her chest. Do you ever feel like I'm too emotional? She had asked. He had laughed softly. I married you because you feel deeply. She hadn't smiled. The paramedics had arrived the following afternoon. Accidental overdose, they said. Anxiety medication mixed incorrectly. No note, no clear intent. Daniel had clung to the word accidental like a shield. But reading this now, he felt something more complicated. She had been reaching, not dramatically, not violently, subtly, and he had been calm, so calm, calm enough to miss it. He pressed the journal against his chest. I'm sorry, he whispered into the empty room. There was no one to hear it, except maybe himself. The next morning, Daniel stood outside Lily's school watching parents scroll through their phones, while children chased each other across the pavement. Two fathers recognized him. "You're that guy," one said, impressed. "The hero?" Daniel forced a polite smile. Hero. If they had seen him 8 years ago sitting at a hospital desk signing paperwork, realizing he had mistaken distance for respect, they would not use that word. His phone buzzed again. A notification. A long-form article had been published overnight. The Psychology of Public Intervention. Why One Man Stepped In. It included commentary from behavioral experts, praise from activists, even speculation about his late wife. Speculation. Daniel felt anger spike. The internet was turning fragments into narrative again. He texted Elena. "They're digging." A pause. Then, "Marcus called me unstable in a statement this morning." Daniel's jaw tightened. Gaslighting had gone public. He typed carefully. "Do you want to respond 3 dots? I don't know how to tell the truth without sounding dramatic." Daniel looked across the playground at Lily, laughing freely. He thought of Rachel's journal, of subtle sentences no one noticed. He replied, "The truth doesn't have to be loud." Another pause. "Will you stand with me if I say it?" That question landed deeper than he expected. Was he standing for her or for Rachel? For redemption or for courage? Daniel closed his eyes briefly. Silence had cost him once. He would not let it cost him again. "Yes," he typed. Across the city, Elena read the message twice. For the first time in months, the fear in her chest shifted slightly. Not gone, but shared. And somewhere between past regret and present risk, Daniel finally understood something Rachel had tried to teach him without ever naming it. Love isn't only what you provide, it's what you notice, and sometimes what you refuse to ignore. The interview was Elena's idea. Not a press conference, not a televised spectacle. Just a long-form podcast hosted by a journalist known for nuance rather than outrage. Control doesn't survive in silence, she had told Daniel over the phone. It thrives there. He had agreed to sit beside her, not as her spokesperson, not as her savior, just as a witness. Still, as he waited outside the Midtown studio, he felt the old question clawing at him. Are you here for her or for yourself? Inside the studio, lights were softer than television lights. Intimate. Designed to feel like conversation rather than confrontation. Elena looked calm. Too calm. "You don't have to do this," Daniel said quietly. She smiled faintly. "I do. For me." The host adjusted her headphones. "Whenever you're ready." The red recording light flicked on. Elena's voice didn't shake. "I wasn't physically abused," she began. "That's important to say. But I was slowly convinced that my instincts were wrong. That my feelings were exaggerated. That my independence was selfish." Daniel watched her hands. Steady. "I almost married him," she continued. "Not because I felt safe, but because I felt afraid of starting over." The confession landed heavier than the street confrontation ever had. "I grew up watching my mother struggle financially after a divorce," Elena said. "Security felt like love. Stability felt like success." The host asked gently, "So you chose status?" Elena inhaled. "Yes." There it was. No performance. No victim script. "I chose the image of a good life over the feeling of a healthy one." Daniel felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't a helpless woman rescued from danger. This was a woman confronting her own compromise. The host turned to him. "Daniel, what made you step in that day?" He had rehearsed a cleaner answer. Instead, he said, "Guilt." Silence filled the studio. "My wife died 8 years ago," he continued. "And before she did, she tried to tell me she was drowning. I told myself I was respecting her space." He didn't look at Elena now. "I learned too late that distance can look a lot like indifference." The host didn't interrupt. "So when I heard Elena ask for help, I didn't see drama," Daniel said. "I saw a second chance I didn't deserve." The red light reflected in the glass between them. Elena turned toward him slightly. "You didn't owe me that," she said softly. "I know," he replied. And for the first time he meant it without self-punishment. The backlash came within hours. Marcus's firm released a sharper statement this time. "Miss Brooks is rewriting history to preserve her public image. Mr. Whitmore has always supported her career and independence." Commentators dissected Elena's admission about status. She stayed for the money. She liked the lifestyle. She's bitter now. Daniel watched the storm build online. He expected Elena to retreat. Instead, she called him. "I don't regret saying it," she said. "I needed to own my part." "You don't owe anyone perfection," Daniel replied. "That's not what I'm doing," she said. I'm done pretending I was powerless. The line went quiet for a moment. Then she asked the question neither of them had fully faced. Why are you still here, Daniel? He leaned back against his kitchen counter, staring at the skyline. What do you mean? You could have stepped in that day and walked away. But you didn't. Her voice wasn't accusing, just searching. Is this about me or about Rachel? The name hung between them. Daniel closed his eyes. For weeks, he had told himself he was being supportive, present, careful. But somewhere beneath that, there had been something else, a quiet hunger to rewrite an ending. I think, he said slowly, at first it was about redemption. Eleanor didn't speak. I thought if I could protect you, maybe it would balance something I failed at before. The admission felt raw, and now she asked. He exhaled. Now I'm starting to understand you're not her. The honesty hurt, but in a clean way. You're not broken in the same way, he continued, and you don't need me to rescue you. Elena absorbed that. Good, she said softly, because I don't want to be rescued. Outside his window, the city pulsed unmoved by personal revelations. I want to choose differently, she continued. Not because I was humiliated, not because I went viral, but because I finally see the pattern. Daniel thought of Rachel's journal again, of the sentence, I don't know how to stay. Elena knew how to stay. She was choosing whether she wanted to. Then choose, he said, and you, she asked. He hesitated. For years he had chosen safety, routine, emotional minimalism disguised as stability. I think I need to stop confusing guilt with love, he admitted. Eleanor's voice softened. You're not responsible for what happened to her. I was part of the environment, he said quietly, even if I didn't mean to be. Silence stretched not heavy this time, but honest. Marcus requested a private meeting, Elena said after a moment. No lawyers, just closure. Daniel's jaw tightened instinctively. She noticed. See, she said gently, you're bracing. He exhaled. I don't trust him. You don't have to, she replied, but I do need to face him. Not because he deserves it, because I do. That was the twist neither of them had anticipated. Elena didn't need Daniel beside her in the confrontation. She needed him to trust her strength. I won't interfere, Daniel said. She smiled faintly. But will you be there afterward? He didn't hesitate this time. Yes. Not as a savior, not as penance, just as himself. After they hung up, Daniel stood in the quiet kitchen for a long time. Redemption wasn't a transaction. It wasn't earned by stepping in once. It was built in how you showed up next. And for the first time since Rachel's death, Daniel felt something unfamiliar rising beneath the guilt. Not forgiveness, not yet, but clarity. Marcus Whitmore didn't raise his voice. He published. At 8:03 a.m., a carefully worded post appeared across his verified accounts. I have remained silent out of respect. However, false narratives cannot go unanswered. I have always supported Elena's independence, career, and well-being. Unfortunately, private disagreements have been weaponized for public sympathy. Attached were curated photos, vacations in Capri charity galas, engagement smiles beneath chandeliers, image as evidence. Within minutes, commentators divided into camps. She's unstable. He's gaslighting her. Where's the proof? Eleanor read the post in her small Brooklyn kitchen, coffee, untouched sunlight, thin against bare walls. He hadn't insulted her. He had reframed her. That was his talent. Her phone vibrated with notifications, reporters requesting comments, strangers offering advice. Then one message stood apart. Daniel, I saw it. Are you okay? She typed back. He's doing what he's always done, making it look reasonable. 3 dots. What do you want to do? She stared at Marcus's caption again. False narratives. Weaponized sympathy. She felt something unexpected, anger, yes, but beneath it resolve. I'm filing for a restraining order, she said aloud to the empty room. Her own voice startled her. The hearing was scheduled quickly. High-profile names, accelerated paperwork. Daniel sat in the hallway outside family court 2 days later, hands folded, posture composed. He wore a navy suit, not armor, not performance, just steadiness. Across the corridor, Marcus stood with his attorney immaculate as ever, calm, confident, as though this were merely another negotiation. When his eyes met Daniel's, they held no rage, only calculation. Inside the courtroom, everything felt smaller than expected. Fluorescent lights, wooden benches, no dramatic music, just procedure. Elena sat at the petitioner's table. Daniel watched her shoulders rise and fall once before she steadied herself. The judge, a woman in her 60s with tired but perceptive eyes, reviewed the documents. Miss Brooks, she began, you're requesting a protective order based on emotional coercion and intimidation. Please explain. Elena didn't cry. She didn't dramatize. She described the silent treatments lasting days, the financial oversight disguised as partnership, the subtle threats, "You'll regret embarrassing me," the pattern of undermining her memory. Marcus's attorney objected twice, labeling it subjective interpretation. The judge allowed her to continue. "Why now?" the judge asked. Elena inhaled. "Because I finally recognized it." Marcus's attorney stood. "Your Honor, my client is a respected attorney with no history of violence. There are no police reports, no medical records. What we have is a public disagreement inflated by media attention." He turned slightly toward Elena. "Isn't it true, Miss Brooks, that you benefited financially from this relationship?" The question was surgical. Elena met his gaze. "Yes." A ripple moved through the room. "And isn't it true you were weeks away from marrying Mr. Whitmore, yes? And now, after gaining public sympathy, you wish to distance yourself while preserving your image?" Daniel felt his jaw tighten. But Elena didn't flinch. "I wish to distance myself because I realized I was afraid," she said. "Not because of his power. Because of my own dependency on it." The honesty shifted the room. Marcus's attorney paused. Then, "Do you have any evidence of threats?" Elena hesitated, then glanced toward Daniel. He understood. When his name was called, the room shifted again. He took the stand. "State your name, Daniel Harper. You intervened during a public altercation between these two parties." "Yes." "What did you observe?" Daniel chose his words carefully. "I observed Miss Brooks verbally asking Mr. Whitmore to release her. I observed him maintaining physical control despite her request." Marcus's attorney approached. "Mr. Harper, you are not a licensed psychologist, correct?" "No." "So your interpretation of control is personal?" "Yes." A faint smirk touched the attorney's lips. "And isn't it true you have personal history influencing your perspective?" Daniel felt the weight of that question. "Yes." "Your late wife died from an overdose." The courtroom stilled. Daniel didn't look away. "Yes." "And you believe you failed to recognize her distress?" Objection from Elena's counsel. The judge allowed limited response. Daniel swallowed. "I believe silence can enable harm," he said evenly. The attorney leaned closer. "So you projected your guilt onto this situation." There it was, the blade disguised as logic. Daniel exhaled slowly. "No," he said. "I recognized a pattern." The judge leaned forward slightly. "What pattern?" she asked. Daniel shifted his gaze not to Marcus but to the judge. "A dynamic where one partner reframes the other's distress as irrational, where withdrawal is used as punishment, where image matters more than impact." Marcus's composure flickered. Daniel continued, voice steady. "I'm not claiming physical violence. I'm describing erosion." The word hung there. Erosion. Not dramatic, not explosive. Gradual. Marcus finally spoke, unable to restrain himself. "This is absurd. You're romanticizing interference." The judge's gaze sharpened. "Mr. Whitmore, you will address the court, not the witness." For the first time, a crack showed. After testimony concluded, the judge reviewed the evidence in silence. Finally, she spoke. "This court acknowledges that coercive control can exist without physical violence. Given the documented communications and witness testimony, a temporary protective order is granted pending further review." The gavel struck, not loudly, but definitively. Elena closed her eyes briefly. Marcus remained motionless, jaw tight, reputation recalibrating in real time. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. Daniel stayed back as Elena stepped forward alone. "No further comment," she said calmly. Not dramatic, not vindictive, just final. When she reached him on the steps, her hands trembled, not from fear, but release. "You didn't have to bring up Rachel," she said softly. "They brought her up," he replied. "And you stayed steady." He considered that. "I'm learning." Sirens wailed in the distance, blending into the rhythm of the city. Marcus exited moments later, flanked by counsel avoiding cameras. For the first time, he looked smaller. Not defeated, but exposed. Elena turned to Daniel. "It's not over," she said. "No," he agreed. But something fundamental had shifted. The battlefield was no longer a street. It was truth against narrative. And this time, silence had not won. 3 months later, the city had moved on. The hashtags were gone. The think pieces replaced by newer scandals. Marcus Whitmore's firm had restructured quietly. His name appeared less frequently in legal journals. The internet had found something else to devour. But for Daniel and Elena, the aftermath was not digital. It was internal. Elena's Brooklyn apartment no longer echoed. Books filled the shelves. A second-hand couch softened the corner near the window. She had taken on freelance design contracts, smaller projects, modest pay, but hers. The protective order had been extended. Marcus had stopped contacting her, not because he agreed, because the narrative no longer served him. One evening, Elena stood at her window watching the skyline flicker across the river. The view was less grand than the penthouse she once shared, but it felt honest. Her phone buzzed. "Daniel, Lily has a school art show tomorrow. No pressure, but you're welcome." She smiled. No pressure. That had become their language. At the elementary school gymnasium, paper lanterns hung crookedly from the ceiling. Parents balanced plastic cups of lemonade while pretending not to compare children's talent. Daniel stood beside Lily's painting an abstract swirl of blues and golds. "It's the river," Lily explained proudly, "but also people." Eleanor crouched beside her. "How are they people?" she asked. "They look separate," Lily said, pointing at the lines. "But they're all connected underneath." Daniel met Elena's eyes briefly. Connected underneath. Children said things adults spent years trying to articulate. Later, when Lily ran off to show a friend her project, Daniel and Elena stood near the bleachers. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I wanted to," she replied. There was no tension now, no urgency, just presence. "I signed a year lease," Elena added quietly. "Not month to month." Daniel smiled faintly. "That's brave." "It's practical," she corrected, then paused. "Brave used to mean attaching myself to someone stable, and now it means trusting I can be." The gym lights hummed overhead. Daniel felt something stir inside him, not rescue, not redemption. Desire. But this time it wasn't tangled with guilt. "I need to tell you something," he said. Elena's posture shifted, not defensive, just attentive. "I spent a long time confusing control with protection," he admitted. "With Rachel, even with Lily sometimes." She listened without interrupting. "I thought being steady meant being emotionally quiet," he continued. "But I'm realizing silence can feel like distance." Elena's expression softened. "You're not distant," she said. "I can be," he replied, "when I'm afraid." "Of what?" He exhaled, losing someone again, getting it wrong again. There it was. Not heroic, not polished. Vulnerability. Elena stepped a little closer, not touching, but near enough to feel warmth. "You will get it wrong sometimes," she said gently. "So will I." He let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh. "That's not very comforting. It's honest." Honesty had become their foundation. No dramatic declarations, no promises built on adrenaline, just clarity. "I don't need you to save me," Elena said softly. "And I don't need you to redeem yourself through me. I know. And I don't want to be chosen because I represent a second chance." Daniel met her gaze fully now. "You're not a second chance," he said. "You're your own person." Silence settled between them, not heavy, but intentional. In the background, Lily's laughter echoed off gym walls. "I don't know what this is," Daniel admitted. Elena smiled faintly. "It's two people trying not to disappear." That felt right. Not romance, not yet, but something truer. Weeks later, Daniel visited Rachel's grave alone. Autumn had started to edge into the air. Leaves scattered across the cemetery paths. He knelt, brushing a hand over the engraved letters. "I can't fix what I missed," he said quietly. "But I'm trying to notice now." The wind moved through the trees like a soft answer. For the first time, the apology didn't feel like self-punishment. It felt like acknowledgement. He stood not lighter, but steadier. That evening, Daniel and Elena met for dinner at a small neighborhood restaurant. No photographers, no headlines, just conversation. She told him about a new client. He told her about Lily insisting on learning piano. At one point, their hands brushed across the table. Neither pulled away immediately. Neither rushed to define it. Outside, the city roared as it always had, indifferent, loud, alive. Inside, two wounded adults chose something quieter. Courage over silence. Clarity over image. Presence over performance. Not a fairy tale. Not a rescue. Just a choice. And this time, no one was looking away.